Download Whiskey Hell Podcast. We call attention to the mainstream media narratives weekly in hopes that you'll have fun with how ridiculous the news really is. We don't want to change your mind. We just want to give you perspective so that you can choose more wisely and be more aware. Couple that with great craft beer, hilarious stories, deep thoughts, and real conversations. We know you're going to enjoy it. Download Whiskey Hell Podcast anywhere you find outstanding shows.
You are listening to a Fonz Media Network production.
On this episode of World Ablaze, I have with me Chris Ricci. Chris Ricci is a city council member for the city of Modesto, California, representing District 3. I wanted to get to know Chris better and find out his thoughts on how people can get more involved at the local level in an effort to instill a positive change for the better. I find Chris to be a good person who wants to offer real-world solutions to problems, rather than offering solutions based on party politics. This is a rare trait in a politician, and I really do wish him the best in his re-election as City Council Member, District 3 for the City of Modesto in California. Welcome, World Ablaze listeners, and today I have Chris Ricci on the show. I know Chris by name because we're both in the events industry. Chris was very well known for throwing some very large events and concerts, and they all involved some very well-known artists. I became interested in Chris's story when he chose to turn to politics. Chris is currently a council member for the city of Modesto, California, representing District 3, and he's currently running again for re-election for that position. I wanted to pick your brain in regard to your political journey and how people can get more involved in politics. But your story in the city of Modesto starts in 1999 when you moved to Modesto, California. Could you please tell everybody what attracted you to Modesto?
Sure. Modesto it's a place that I have family here in Modesto a little bit. And so I've been going to Modesto all my life. And I realized that this city, there's just a ton of opportunity here. And I wanted to launch my own promotion business. And there weren't a lot of shows here. And so there's just a lot of opportunity. And I think that that's something that people really don't understand about Modesto is that it's a big city. I mean, it's over 200,000 people. I think within the next 10 years, we're going to be, over 250,000 people. And we lack a lot of the features that a big city would have. And so there's just a ton of opportunity, and that makes it really attractive to people like me that are pretty entrepreneurial.
Yeah, and I agree with you because I noticed we have, for example, I have friends in the Bay Area, and the Bay Area is kind of, big broad brush that people paint on anything near San Francisco, really, but Modesto being over 200,000 population, then you have like cities, people have this perspective that, I'm in the Bay and we're so much bigger, but like cities like Hayward really have a smaller population. Newark has a smaller population. And then you come to Modesto and it's like, actually in terms of people, it's much bigger. But as you said, the perception is it's smaller. The perception is we don't really have as much to offer. And there are some services that we don't have. But You came here, you started the promotion company. What got you into doing events, by the way, live events? I always wanted to ask you that.
I grew up on the peninsula, and I've just always been really passionate about music. When I grew up in the 90s, it was just it was a good time for music.
Yeah.
The music business was very strong. It was really easy to build big acts. And so I would go to San Francisco and see, concerts all the time. I would go all over the Bay Area and see, my favorite bands like Social Distortion and Nine Inch Nails and all those, 90s bands,
Right.
And then when I went to college in San Diego, I went to University of San Diego. I got on the concert board. And so I started producing these. I've been going to concerts for, years in San Francisco. And then I was like, wow, I can bring these bands that I saw, at the Warfield to play at my college. And I just really got a bug for it. I booked like No Doubt and Sublime and Cherry Poppin' Daddies and Cake, like all in one year when I was doing the concert committee and at San Diego, and I just didn't look back.
That's cool. And a lot of people don't ever see the other side of it, and you were on the other side. So I mean, can you kind of expand on that? Like how you felt in doing that? I mean, just being able to interact with the actual artists, see their writers, and that whole behind the scenes that makes this whole thing happen. Do you mind expanding?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a lot of talking with agents and managers, and I think probably the most surprising thing about the business is how little connection you really have with the artists directly. I mean, these people are, they're traveling from city to city to city, and so I think it's an important thing to keep in mind when you're seeing an artist at a show. Um, but it was just helping artists, get their art out there and putting them in front of an audience was just a very satisfying, chapter in my life.
Yeah, I also think a lot of people don't understand with artists that as much as they want to interact and they're thankful for the support from the crowd, it's also a job and they have to be on time. They have schedules that they got to adhere to make sure things are going smoothly so they can just get back on the bus and go to the next show. And I think a lot of people have misperception of what they actually are doing. They are entertaining you, but at the same time, they got bills to pay and they have contracts to fulfill as well. So
Yeah, and I mean it's just so deep, right? Like
yeah,
they've got families, a lot of them have families, and they're, life on the road, it's brutal, So I've got a lot of respect for these guys that can do this. And I think people really kind of build it up to being something it's not. I mean,
right.
it's mostly just hard mentally and physically, and there's big payoffs in playing great shows, but I think it's also like it's quite a sacrifice they make to their fans.
And I don't think a lot of people understand this with the larger artists. Like they themselves are a business. I mean, everybody on the road, they're paying those people's paychecks. They're not just showing
Yep.
up and helping for free. So a lot
Exactly.
of people don't realize that as well.
Yep.
Yeah, a
Yep.
lot of responsibility. You're right. It's crazy. So that leads me to this. I never knew that you did this. How did this relationship with your promotion company, which was Chris Ricky Presents, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. How did you get involved in the politics side? Because I found out through your notes you sent me that you got into actually working with candidates. Is that correct? Political
Yeah.
candidates?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a little bit deeper than that, but the catalyst for me switching into politics was really X Fest. X Fest is defunct, and it's been defunct for almost 10 years now. But the reason why it's defunct is because of policies um, that were in place, by the city of Modesto.
Okay.
So, you can complain about policies and you can be angry, or you can, try to change those policies and try to change the government's perspective on things. And so when the city came in and really just kind of put me out of business, um, I decided that I was going to try to change the city. And so that's why I started working in politics.
You just took it upon yourself to make a difference from the inside.
Well, it's the only way things can really change. I mean, you can try to yell at them from the outside, and sometimes that works if the government's listening. But changing people's perceptions, like, on X Fest. When I started X Fest in the year 2000, Modesto, it was a very white place. It was 85% Anglo. Today it's 50-50. And if you look at the demographics of Modesto City Schools, it's 70-30. And so we're just becoming more Hispanic every day. And one of my goals, and so I'm a promoter, right? I don't care. I know what I'm promoting to. I know that the demographic for X Fest was 21 to 35, period. So I need to market my stuff to younger people, younger adults, right?
Yes.
Well, as those demographics change, the markets for the young adults change. And as they become more Hispanic, you need to book, music that attracts Hispanics. Well, the reality is that when you got a crowd of 20,000 people and 15,000 of them are Hispanic, it just back in 2016, that made the city of Modesto nervous.
Got
And
it.
so, you know,
I never knew that. So
that had to be dealt with. And that, I'm trying to be kind in the way I say this.
no,
So,
I understand.
you
Trust
know,
me, I understand. But I didn't know that was something that was behind one of the reasons that you were having a hard time during that period. Because it was huge and hugely successful. Everybody knew about it, and then all of a sudden,
yeah, if you spoke to people at the city, I'm certain they would have different answers.
okay.
But that's my answer.
Well, I mean, I'd rather get it from you. You know, because the people to this day still talk about the things that you did, and they're like, "Man, I wish he would bring it back. I wish he would just continue." And no, I don't think a lot of people heard the real story. So I'm glad that you laid it out because a lot of people didn't know.
Well, I mean, if you're Hispanic, right? If you're Hispanic, try to walk in downtown Modesto at 11:30 at night in a 49ers jersey
Yeah.
and see what kind of attention you get from people,
Hmm.
right? Like it's, it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
There's a lot of long-term perceptions that, and some of them are true, right? I don't want to deny that we have gang issues, but my problem is that every person who's a certain way is not a gang member. Do you see what I'm saying?
No, I do completely understand. I mean, there's that old, there's that saying, judging a book by its cover, right? And unfortunately, too many people do that. They don't want to go out of the way to get to know people and know who they really are and what they can offer.
Yeah.
And in the case of Modesto, I can speak from living here, for X amount of years as well. It's, people at that time were absolutely afraid of change.
Yeah, that's right.
There was a lot of ingrained good old boy, type of culture out here in Modesto at that time, and they just didn't want to keep up with the changes in the demographics. They didn't want to keep up with the demands of what the population actually needed, and they were just going out of their way to suppress it. They didn't want to lose their perception of what they thought they had control of. And so, yeah, it takes people like you to go out of your way and make those changes. It sounds like that's exactly what you were doing.
Yeah, and I think that and I want to, I don't want people to think that I'm beating on the city of Modesto. They've over the last few years, they've really done some deep self-reflection. They've done, like the police department, for example, has done some great training in the community where they got together with people, from different backgrounds, and just everyone sat down and just kind of laid it out. How do you feel about cops? How do the cops feel about these, about different community members, like all these things. And at the end of the road, when they went through it, they gained more understanding and more empathy, and these experiences are guiding the future of departments in the city of Modesto, and I'm proud of that.
That's good to hear. And I see it slowly turning into, I would say, a revival of downtown. I've seen the changes from being here. I've seen it, when it was, hot and really busy, and then all of a sudden we had that slump, and then it looks like it's slowly coming back. And I'm sure a lot of what you just said, it really is the reason that that's starting to happen again.
Yeah, I think that, at least my perception is like the city tried to shut down all the clubs. They were mostly successful. But now the clubs are slowly coming back. And the question's going to be like how, and when you have clubs, you're going to have some issues. And the question is going to be like how the city chooses to deal with that. And I think that kind of remains to be seen. But I think, I don't know, it'll be interesting. And I'm looking forward to helping them get through it.
Yeah. And so far, so good. So far,
so far, so good. But,
yeah.
It ebbs and flows, right? And so if we get, another 20 clubs downtown, it's going to create a new enforcement atmosphere, that the city's going to have to figure out how they want to do it. And the last time they got in that situation, they chose to just try to shut everything down. I don't know what'll happen this time, but I'm hopeful it'll be better.
Yeah, I do too. And that's another example of fear fear of
Yeah.
change and the unknown, just like we were talking about earlier about judging people, as if they were, the book, judging a book by its cover. Sorry, kind of fumbling a little bit, but
Yeah.
you get where I'm going.
Well, we're not talking about an easy subject here.
No, it's not, but it's the truth. And
Yeah.
you're not saying anything wrong. You're not, and Modesto's changing, and it's changed for the better. And it's not just about Modesto. I think it's across the country this is happening, and there needs to be more change of acceptance of people in general, and learning that, hey, it's not always going to be your little corner of the world forever. We're growing, and it's just happening, period. So, no, I'm with you. I really am. Do you mind if I go back to the digital marketing company that you got involved with a little bit, or how they utilize your services? Yeah. So can you explain that relationship and how that happened?
Yeah. So I wanted to get involved in the political sphere for the reasons I already kind of talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned I've been doing marketing obviously my whole life. I've been marketing shows, and I found that digital platforms were just the best ways to communicate with people. Look at what we're doing right now. This is going to be put out on podcast platforms, right?
Absolutely.
20 years ago, that option did not exist. And we see the impact that new media is having on the world. Modesto B not even a daily newspaper anymore. Don't even know what it is, but it's there. And and the thing is, every day it becomes less critical, to our community because they just aren't out there. They aren't getting the eyes that they used to get. So they just aren't as important. And so I decided I wanted to get into it. And so a buddy of mine was starting a company. And I said, hey, I'm in. I want to do it. And so, I started working with them. They basically hired my company to do marketing for them for, part-time, 20 hours a week. And eventually, as the company grew and as I was able to be more successful, I became a partner in Compete Digital. And now that's what I do.
Gotcha. So do you, can you talk about the services offered through that company?
Yeah. We're a digital marketing company. We focus on causes and campaigns.
Okay.
And we work with people running for office, and we work with people that are trying to pass legislation locally and at the state level. And it's all over the country, not just in California.
That's interesting. So you're kind of on the other side of it and helping people get their campaign and their word out and basically being known, right?
Yeah, the idea is just to teach people how to communicate in this really new world that has changed so rapidly. As you probably, I assume I've got a very active social media posture for my council seat.
Mm-hmm.
And I speak to my constituents on social media every single day. And I'm running conversations with them, and we work out policy together live and publicly every single day. 25 years ago, you could not do that. That was not an option. And so the opportunity for candidates and causes to really educate people about what they're trying to do, and have honest, transparent conversations are really there. Are there bad sides to it too? Absolutely. I mean, you see what's going on in X right now, on Twitter.
Yeah.
I can't,
that's kind of a cesspool of, back and forth information on all sides. There's times where you're like, yeah, great free speech platform. And then there's other times where you're like, why am I seeing porn? And why am I seeing this crazy hate speech rhetoric? Like, I don't understand. It just doesn't make any sense.
It's just not good. Like in the UK, I don't know if you heard about the mass murder that happened, with the kids at the school. But it was really bad. And, on X, they posted a fake story, but it got a lot of traction saying that a immigrant had done the murders, which was totally false. But that false narrative whipped up a bunch of really angry people, and they started riots in a bunch of major English cities. And so it's also, as much good as it can do, as much honesty as it can have, as much transparency, as much good dialogue we can have, it also can be incredibly dangerous.
I don't mind the honesty, but I don't like the spin. And
Yeah.
I don't agree, unfortunately, because everyone's attention spans are short. Too many people are just taking, and it's true, we're living in a world of sound bites and clips, and that's what people base all the information on instead of, digging deeper. I mean, too many people rely on the headlines and not really looking into the actual story. And I think that's a huge problem, personally. But most people just don't have the patience to read all the info anymore, and that's where the danger is, because it's so easy, as you said, with the example of what happened with that story in the UK, totally taken out of context, totally creates a situation that just boils over and it just turns into something horrible that should never have happened.
Yeah, and I mean, we also need to have a historical perspective here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like everything you said is true. But if you look back, in the 19th century, people would promote stuff just through like they just create their own little newspaper or their own little newsletter and just hand it out and write absolutely preposterous things,
True.
you know?
True.
And so like this misinformation is as human as, pretty much anything, right? Um, so the misinformation hasn't really changed. We went through kind of a golden period, in the post-war to, the mid 2010s
Mm-hmm.
of, of really having a lot of reliable multi mass media that you could count on to actually deliver a lot of facts. I mean, they got it wrong a lot too. Look at the Iraq War, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there was a real effort, I think, to get it right.
I,
You know,
I can agree with you on that. In that time period, what did you? I mean, because you're in media, you're in marketing. What did you think was the change? Like, what caused the change to become so polarized and so, going back to just taking things out of context and trying to drive a message rather than the actual message, which should just be the news.
I mean, the reason that it changed from a more like from a kind of balanced facts-based approach to a more political biased approach was
Mm-hmm.
the change of the Fair Use Act, I think it's called. I don't know, it was under Reagan. But basically they took this act that was made that required media services to be fact-based and said, look, the First Amendment says you can say whatever you want, and this law is unconstitutional. And so ever since that's when then they launched Fox News and everything kind of changed after that.
Yeah.
And by the way, that it is correct that you shouldn't be allowed to censor people, based on the First Amendment. Has it had a pretty horrific impact on the country? Yeah, it has. But we're going through a change, right? And I'm pretty positive, like I think we're going to find ourselves in the future in a world that, it's still going to have some of this stuff, but hopefully we get to a place where we get back to that kind of more fact-based perspective and the places that are, delivering bad information are more marginalized like they used to be.
Well,
Um,
I can agree with you because I think a major problem is you should have a right to say. Of course, everyone's always protect my free speech, but I also can see the other side where if it's news where you're supposed to be just reporting what is happening so people are actually informed of the truth, then that should be truthful information, I believe. And if you have a show such as, let's say, Fox or MSN or whoever you watch, and you see like a Hannity or a Maddow or whatever, people must realize that those shows in and of themselves aren't so much news as they are opinion pieces, people giving opinions more than they are giving the actual news. And then you have other shows in those networks that actually should just be giving the news. I don't think it's clearly defined to the public what's really going on. And I think that's where we get into trouble. Because I think the news should be truthful. I mean, back to the Walter Cronkite days. It was just no emotion, just, here's what's happening. And you form your own opinions based on the information. And now it seems like they're pushing on all sides. I'm not gonna pick sides here, Chris. It just seems like everyone's kind of trying to herd everybody into their own little, encampment here, to believe whatever, instead of just saying, hey, there was a volcano yesterday that blew at 11 a.m. and this is what happened. Versus there was a volcano that blew and specifically just targeted this group of people, and the reason it did is because they're bad people. There's a big difference between telling the truth of the story and trying to manipulate it. That's just my opinion, by the way. But
yeah, but I mean, the problem comes in, and I think this is why MSN and Fox exists. But the problem comes in is when you tell the truth and you're like, yeah, the volcano got overloaded because of, and this is not possible, but because of climate change. You
Right.
know what I mean? And then the people on one side, the people that are like, let's say the petroleum people are like, hey, I don't want people to know that. Come up with another reason,
True.
and so as long as the truth hurts any special interest group, you're gonna have people mad that you're delivering whatever that truth is,
Well, and
right?
therein lies the problem.
Right. And so that's where we're at. People with really deep pockets on both sides are saying, hey, we need to get our word out over
Yes.
everybody else's. And that's the war that's being fought right now.
I mean, we agree definitely, and it's sad, to see that that's the reality. The message is based on whoever has the most money. Unfortunately.
Well, yeah. I mean,
Right?
it's true. It's true.
Um,
I got nothing, dude. I got nothing. It's the way it is right now.
no, I hear you, and I asked your opinion, and you gave it, and I agree with you. I mean, you're not wrong. It's all very true. It is. When you were helping people with their campaigns, I wanted to ask you, what did you learn from being on that side of it, and how a campaign works, and working with people running for political offices?
Well, it's hard. Running
Okay,
for office is really hard.
so I know you did. So, and
Yeah.
you're going to be running again, correct? Am I correct in that?
Yeah, you're correct.
Okay.
I'm running again in November. But I think that people discount the importance of their relationships in the community,
Hmm.
and so what I find is the candidates that tend to win are the people that are most connected to their communities. Your question, or was there more?
Oh no, I basically wanted to know what from working with candidates and marketing campaigns, whatnot, like what you learned from it, how it affects people in running campaigns. And that being said, with what you learned, I want to ask this: knowing what you know now from being on that side of marketing and helping other people campaign, knowing then what you knew now, how are you going to run your campaign differently now? Because you are running for City Council District 3, City of Modesto.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So would you do different this time around with your campaign?
Yeah, what I'm going to do different this time around is, I obviously my first time running, I had limited funds. I mean, I had good funds. I had more money than anyone else in the race, right?
Mm-hmm.
But all my donors were really small, right? And so my average donation was like $200. Um, and my opponents only had like, 10 donations, and they were like all for, two, three, $4,000, right?
Oh, okay.
Um, Now I ended up having more because I just worked really hard. But the problem when you have limited funds is that you don't have enough money to talk to all the voters, right? And so I think the biggest mistake I made is that I didn't cast my net wide enough, to talk to all the voters about what I wanted to do. Because my ideas aren't conservative or liberal. They're just good ideas for our community. And everyone, for the most part, can agree with all of it. You
Would
know,
you say you're more down the middle, or you just kind of take things on as they make sense?
I see my job as to identify problems in the community and find solutions.
I think that's what most politicians should do.
And
Really.
so some people, like, I'm a big supporter of the Modesto Police Department. I like the fact that they have been willing to look at themselves and improve themselves this, since I've been in office. They've added a independent police review board. They've added an independent police auditor. They've added alternate response teams. They've added park rangers. They've done all these things that I've asked them to do, right? They just keep getting better. And I support that. And I support them, and I know how hard their jobs is, right? Well, there's a lot of people on the left. You can go on my Facebook page and look at my post yesterday about how amazing it is that the city of Modesto is sending our police officers up to is it a Baker fire? The fire up in Chico in Butte County.
Oh, I forgot where,
Park fire, I think it's called.
Yeah, but there's a big one going on right now for sure.
Yeah. And they needed help. Butte County needed help evacuating people and like keeping people safe from this fire, right? And they asked for mutual aid, and Modesto Police Department sent some people up there. And I said, it's really great that we're able to send people up there and help other communities, because mutual aid helps our neighbors when they're most in need, right? And I had a guy call me a bootlicker for making that comment. You know what I mean?
What was his reasoning? Did he explain himself? That doesn't make sense.
No, he didn't explain himself. And
of course,
I'm not going to try to not explain. I'm just saying, people, I think there's good reasons to support our law enforcement. And that's why I do. And that's why I'm endorsed by the Modesto Police Department, because I support them and because they do a good job, and because they're willing to be introspective and make themselves better. It's a good police department, and we need to back them up, right? It's not popular with everybody, bro.
No, it isn't. That's sad. We do need police officers. There's good police officers. There's people who want to make a difference and actually do their jobs. And, in any industry, whether it's law enforcement or, even if you're working for a large, tech company, there's bad actors everywhere. And unfortunately, most police departments get judged by a few news stories out there. And it doesn't mean it reflects the entire department or all departments everywhere. And it's a sad thing. I mean, I agree with you in supporting the police department. If we didn't have law enforcement, we would be a city of chaos, probably be teetering on anarchy.
Yeah, it'd be bad.
You need checks and balances, period.
That's, and but my point is that like on any issue, there's going to be people on one side or the other that get angry at you.
Absolutely.
So like,
you can't please everybody.
Try to identify my problems and then do my best to address solutions. And most of the time, those solutions, I try to choose the path that gets the job done and doesn't make people angry.
Yeah, but it sounds like you're being objective and making the right choices, which is what most people don't do, unfortunately. So it's good to hear that that's your perspective and how you approach things.
That's how I try to approach it.
I admire it. I think that's the way.
Perfect. I haven't been perfect. I'll give you a good example of where I did really poorly, right? Okay. So, because I believe in learning from your mistakes, and I think everyone should do that, right?
Yes.
Like when you look at homelessness, one of the major causes of homelessness is just not having a place for people to go, And so one of our solutions at the city of Modesto is we're doing bridge housing, which is essentially they just build houses, and they're made out of they're tiny houses. Sometimes they're made out of containers, or whatever, but they're just kind of temporary edifices just to give people a place to go, right? And they don't just let anybody go into them, right? Like usually what they'll do is we've got a whole system to try to help people, right? So like you go to, let's say you end up at the shelter, and let's say you did really good. You got a job, but you just don't have enough money to, and you're not on drugs, and you're doing like all the things you need to do, but there's just nowhere for you to go. You just don't make enough money to qualify for an apartment. Well, bridge housing is a good solution because they can go into bridge housing. They've got their own space. They can save up some money for a deposit. And then when they make enough money finally and they have it all saved up and their credit's fixed, they can get back into society, right? Well, we were looking at doing when I say we, the city was looking at doing a bridge housing project over in Woodland West, right? And I didn't think it'd be that big a deal, right? Like we're talking 20 units.
Where was that one, Chris? Where was that?
Woodland West. That's over it's kind of by Wood Colony.
Okay.
And it was like going to be built on church land. It's just like an orchard right now. But the neighborhood was really, really pissed about it. Like, you're going to bring these people and they're all messed up and they're going to bring all this violence and danger. And like, people really, really mad, you know? And like, I don't believe in making people really, really mad, And so I had to like go to them and say, look, guys, this is a mistake. We can't do this here. And we're going to have to find somewhere else for it. And that's what we did together. We're working on finding new places and new solutions, right? So we've kept that in mind in new locations. Let's be very transparent with the neighborhood about what we're doing. Let's get that out in front of things so that people can react. And some people will call it NIMBY, and maybe that's right, maybe it's wrong, right? But as that neighborhood's representative, I have to be sensitive to how they feel about where they live.
Yeah, I think the homelessness is a hard one because everybody wants to fix it, but then it has to be on their terms. And there's a misconception of what a homeless person is. My dad is so he still is a registered minister, and he'll still go out to like homeless shelters and whatnot, and he'll go ahead and play music and whatnot and try to talk to families. And I remember there's a couple of times I filled in because one of his musicians couldn't make it. So I was like, yeah, sure, I'll go play. And I got to talk to a few families that were literally displaced because, they got laid off, whatever happened with their job situation, not their fault, and somehow just ended up where they're now homeless, and they're just trying to get back on track. And it is so hard for them to find resources and figure out how to do that. Like, how do they get their life back? How do they go down that pathway to getting where they were? And there's a lot of those people out there that unfortunately are displaced because of that. And everybody just thinks homeless just means dirty criminal drug user. And it's not necessarily that's what it is. There's a lot of people just trying to get their lives back.
Some of them definitely are, but not all of them, right?
Not all, but there's some, but it's not all. And there's people that really just, they fell into a bad situation and they're just trying to get back to, providing for their families and getting back into a home and getting their feet back on the ground.
Yeah. Well, it's like, I don't want to look at this negatively, right? Like, we can beat up people like, oh, those people, they're just not understanding and not cool because they want it in their community. We can argue that back and forth. You're going to have some people that say, yeah, they're horrible people. And other people are going to say, like, they're just protecting their area, whatever, right? It's irrelevant. We just can't worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is, hey, it's going to be hard, but we have to find locations that are, that cause the least amount of drama with people. And if that's what you have to look for. Is it hard? Yeah. But you know what? Stuff's hard, man.
Well,
deal with it.
Change is hard. Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, we can sit here and complain and be like, this stinks and why can't they just let us do it our way? No. That's not how government or people work. If it was so easy, everyone would be doing it. You know what I mean? Like, it's fine. It's just not easy.
I find sometimes if it's too easy, you start to question yourself. You're like, wait a minute, did I do this right?
Yeah. So like, look, let's accept the fact that this is going to be hard and just, sit down at the table and get stuff done. And that's what we're trying to do. And hats off to the city of Modesto. They've got the first bridge housing project past the council. They're building it right now at 10th, 9th and D in downtown Modesto. We got another one that's going to be going up, over in by the gospel mission. It's going to be small. It's only 10 units, but it's going to be for single women basically. And, we're moving in the right direction, much slower than I wish we could, but at least some projects are happening.
Well, at least there's progress being made.
Yeah. So like, I'm not going to pin it on a neighborhood, for how they feel, right? Like, we can still solve the problem. Yeah.
And that's not what I was intending to do. I was just kind of bringing up, what you learned by actually talking to the people who were there. I just ran into that, versus just having an assumption and then you walk out going, oh shoot, that sucks. These guys had to go through that. And that was basically what I was trying to say
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, it's good to hear what you're doing, though. So then, I was going to actually go back to the money thing. And I don't think a lot of people understand really, because you said that would help you talk to more people. I don't think understand why it takes so much money to campaign.
It's actually super simple, really. So one of the main ways that, and this is the easiest way to explain it to people. So like, all those mailers you get from candidates that come in the mail around election time, and it's like, vote for me because of X, Y, and Z, right? You
Absolutely.
know what I'm talking about, that
Yeah, yeah,
political mail?
yeah.
Well, every one of those pieces of political mail you have to put a stamp on, right? To deliver it. And so you have to pay for all those stamps and and you have to pay the guy to design the piece, and you have to pay to have it printed, you know? And so if you want to cast a wider net, you need more money to pay for more stamps to get it to more people.
Uh,
It's not just mailers, right? You also
oh,
have to
no,
do
no.
mail. You have to do digital, right? Digital works the same way as mail. You have to pay for the impressions that are going to go to each of the voters. It's just like paying for stamps. It's just a different way of doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You got to pay for your text messages. You should be doing text messages. You got to pay for your field team to be knocking doors. And it's just really expensive. And the bigger the district you got, the more expensive it is.
Yeah, and that's why I was asking you to expand on the money side, because a lot of people. So you're, because you were already in a promotions business and marketing, so you understand that side. I understand that side from being involved in different businesses, but the average person doesn't realize, like, hey, when you see that ad on TV, that costs money. When you hear that radio ad, that costs a lot of money.
Right.
And most people don't realize that, because the average person isn't going to buy a commercial, or run an ad on radio, or a podcast or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And they just don't see that part of it. And, it's like when you hear these presidential campaigns, oh, they raised 800 million, 200 million, whatever. Some people are like, well, why do you need all that money? Well, so that they can get their voice out. It just doesn't happen. You have to pay for those opportunities to get your message across to the people. And that's the thing. The average person just doesn't understand that. And that's why I asked you that. I just, I wanted to get it directly from someone who runs for office, who's a city council member running again, just directly telling people, look, this is why we need the funds. This is what it goes to.
The job is like, my job as a council member when I'm running for office is to sell my ideas to voters.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't let you know what my ideas are, then how can you make an informed decision, right? Hopefully my opponents are doing the same thing, right? Like and in my first election, you saw that, like one of the candidates' message was, hey, I'm endorsed by the police department. One of the candidates was like, hey, I'm going to hire more cops. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And my message was more like, I want to try to solve problems for Modesto. And in the end, I did a better job of communicating that than they did.
In which
right?
at that time, nobody was taking your approach. I think people wanted problems to be solved, but nobody was saying they were going to do it.
Yeah, you can't solve it. Look, as much as I, support our police department, and I do, I'm one of the biggest supporters of our police department. You can't solve every problem in your community with a cop. It just doesn't do it. So how do we can't solve our problem, our economic challenges, like our economic development challenges with a police officer. We need to invest in economic development to do that.
Yeah.
Right. We can't solve our housing shortage with law enforcement. So like I believe we've got to take a holistic approach. Law enforcement's part of that. Having great fire coverage is part of that. But there's a lot more that goes into having a healthy, safe, thriving city.
Well, there is. I used to do, I used to handle the live streams, went out for a few cities on their council meetings. And I remember sitting in them. And I remember noticing, and I'm going to ask you this question, your thoughts on this, that there's a lot of people living within a city that always complain about things, but they don't get out of their way to get involved, and listen to what's happening and hear the arguments and make informed decisions. And I noticed at council meetings, there was always like a handful of regulars. There wasn't, I would see it get packed once in a while if there was, like, let's say a citizen or someone from a high school getting a special recognition, all of a sudden the room would be packed. But on other days, it'd be like, 15, 20 people, sometimes, more than that. But it was always the same faces. And I heard from some people, because I'd say, hey, yeah, I do the, streaming for City X. I won't say them all, but, and they would ask me, well, what'd you hear? And they would complain about certain things. I'm like, well, I hear you, but, you got to kind of get involved if you want to make the difference or make the change. So I've always heard the argument that some people felt like there were decisions being made by only a handful of people, a few people only, and making decisions for everybody. And they complain about that. What is your thoughts on that statement?
I actually love the question. The thing about our democracy, and it's such a our democracy, we should cherish it, right? It's just such a powerful thing. And what I mean is that literally anyone can in our city can come into city hall and like make a difference, you know? And the reason why people don't is because it's hard. It takes a dramatic investment of time to do it. So sure, one person can change policy at City Hall, but you need to come to City Council, you know, consistently with your issue and then push your issue through, on and convince the council that this is an important issue that needs to be dealt with. And the problem is most people don't. And so, as a representative, what I try to do is channel what I'm hearing, on the street, on social media, things that are frustrating residents, and then I try to be proactive in guiding the government to deal with those things. But then there's other things that like I haven't been able to do because I don't have enough support in the public. Like for example, we've got thousands of Modestans that really want an outdoor roller rink, right? A replacement for Roller King, but they just can't put together a couple dozen people to come to the meeting every week and talk about why it's so important to Modesto.
Right.
And as a result, the representatives don't understand why it's so important to Modesto, and so it doesn't happen, you know? And so, like, rather than looking at it like, oh, people suck because they don't come to the meetings, no, it's like you've got this magic system that you can really make stuff happen with. And if you believe in what you want so much, you dedicate yourself and your idea is good and you can convince the council, your idea is going to happen.
Yeah. And that goes back to getting involved at the local level. People have to go out of their way to work with their elected officials if they want to advocate for change, or if they want to do something that they see, in their mind would be beneficial to the people in general. And it's just sitting on your couch and just hating the fact that decisions aren't being made is not going to change anything.
No, like I'll give you an example. Like you look at the cruising ban was lifted by the city council last year.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah.
Yeah. And they made an argument. They're like, look, cruising is a family event. If I have a 64 Impala convertible, that's a $150,000 car. Do you think that I'm going to like put that at risk by doing donuts and shenanigans with it? Like you're crazy. Like the people that cruise now are a totally different breed than what you imagined, 30 years ago. But that's still like breaking through people's perceptions of what cruising is in 2024 versus what it was in 1992.
Yes.
Really, really hard.
Well, and the thing, for example, the cruising issue, for example, as it relates to Modesto, it's like it's ingrained in Modesto's history.
Right.
It was a big part of it. And I'm glad that it was repealed and allowed to happen again, because it's not like every day you're going to see a large group of people. It usually happens around graffiti time or, certain special events. So it's not like every day there's just streets flooded with cars, cruising, but giving them the opportunity to show off the rides, enjoy themselves. It's a community cultural thing. It's not anything negative that negatively impacts Modesto.
Right. But this group of people had to sell that idea, and it took them a year. But they got all this momentum. They came to the city council and eventually they passed it. But they didn't just stop at city council. They went to the state and they had the ban made illegal across the entire state of California.
That's awesome.
Um,
That's a great
and
example of getting
so
involved.
Yeah, but it just proves what I'm talking about. Like it's the magic of our system. And yeah, the system is kind of broken in my opinion at the federal level right now. I'm hopeful that they can fix it someday and bring the people back and like kind of push back the special interests a little bit, but at least on a local level, on a state level, like just regular citizens can have a dramatic impact on policy. You just have to, again, share your truth. Share the truth with your representatives and convince them that that's the right thing to do.
Well, that's I can't say any better than that, to be honest, because that's all true. It's all true. I'm of the mind that changing things nationally and at the federal level, to me, and I may be wrong, you can correct me, but to me, when it comes to policy and politics in general, but I think it's more of a funnel up than a funnel down situation. I believe it gets changed at the local level, then city. There's city level, local level, town level, whatever, then state, and then it just goes up. So if you have a strong foundation at the base, those policies become infectious and then influence everything else as it moves up to the top. And I think that if you're not trying to influence change in policy at the local level, it starts in your own backyard, right? And if you're not trying to do that, then nothing's going to change anywhere. And that is my opinion. I'm not saying that may be the correct for everything, but that's kind of how I view it. What is your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I agree with you to a point, right? But the problem right now is that you've got corporations that can give unlimited amounts of money to any cause they want through the PAC system.
True.
And, politicians stand up to PACs with unlimited amounts of money at their own peril, you know? And as long as kind of giving is legal, you're not going to see, the changes, that I think our country needs. Like an example would be, on prescription drugs, we have the highest prescription drug costs in the entire world.
We do.
And that's because the pharmaceutical companies have donated so much money to candidates and have so many PACs going that it's just like pulling teeth, thing accomplished. And there's been some progress made, like insulin now. Biden passed that thing, so it's only, max $35 a month or whatever for insulin. Wonderful. But it's just like pulling teeth, and you can go through every lobby there is,
Yeah.
about, and it's just really, it's basically we're moving at a snail's pace to change things that need to be changed, because the system has made it so it's more or less impossible on what, maybe not impossible, but like incredibly difficult to sow any sort of meaningful change.
Well, you're not wrong. You can't. I mean, it's hard for the average person to compete with those deep pockets. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's that, so as they say, money talks. Unfortunately, that's the truth.
Yeah.
As far as pharmaceuticals go, I mean, I'm not gonna beat this topic, but what's crazy is the U.S. is probably the largest profit center for pharmaceutical companies, and one of the only countries where you can actually advertise your pharmaceuticals to people, which is crazy.
Not crazy. Like, hey, don't trust your doctor. You just tell your doctor you want this drug.
Right. And these are people that, I'm not a doctor. I don't know, you're training. I don't know I don't think you are. I'm not. I'm
not a doctor.
Yeah, I could watch this commercial and say, yeah, I want to feel better or whatever. And then they kind of just blow through the side effects like, oh, we kind of told you, but not really. It's ridiculous. And that is all, as you said, a result of just dealing with those really deep pockets because they're incentivized to do so. And it's sad. But still, I think that if people get involved locally, it does help make change. At least take care of your backyard, right? So, and I don't know, maybe eventually it will change everything up at the top. At least I'm believing so. I may be naive at that, but I'm hoping. I'm hoping.
I mean, hopefully. We always got to hope for things to get better. But what I'll also say, man, is that it doesn't matter what, society you're in or what city you're in. Like you hear all this stuff, about, like Chicago is such a tough town and da da da, right? But
Hmm.
like, you know, I spend quite a bit of time in Chicago, and I think it's like one of the best cities on the planet, right? Um, but every city has their challenges. Modesto has its challenges, right?
Yeah.
San Francisco has a different set of challenges. Biloxi, Mississippi has its own challenges. Memphis, Tennessee has a whole different set of challenges. Like we can go through red states, red towns, blue towns. Doesn't matter. You name any city on the planet, you can point at 10 major issues that city has, and they're all going to be different based on, you know, the country's economy and the education level of the people and what kind of governments they have. Like the bottom line is, it doesn't matter how good we do, we're always going to have issues that we have to address.
Well, yeah, and it's because those issues, as you were saying, are going to be unique to its region based on population, education, everything. I mean, you can't just throw a blanket over it and expect it to fix everything. And, I understand that. And you do travel a lot,
If
so
we have,
you
if
get
we
to
have
see
nothing, yeah, if we have nothing to fix, like what's the point?
it. Right? I mean, pretty much. Yeah, that's very true. As far as
But yeah, I do travel a lot, man. I just got back from Spain, and like they've got like it was weird, like everywhere I went, there was like graffiti on the walls in English saying tourists go home.
really.
I couldn't leave fast enough. You know what I mean? But they're having a real issue like with housing. And I totally agree with them, by the way. Like I rented an Airbnb. It was like $250 a night. It had, two bedrooms, two bathrooms, it had a rooftop, like chaise lounge. You could hang out up there. And by us staying in that spot, that was a place that an average, person in Barcelona couldn't rent it because a bunch of tourists are coming in, and like that's something that as a city you have to consider. Like
Right.
you're, you're by you have to balance your tourism with the needs of the people that live in your city. And the fact that they let it to get to the point where people are actually putting anti-tourist graffiti everywhere, like I'm not going back to Barcelona anytime soon. I'll tell you that right now. I'm
Hmm.
not going to be part of the problem.
And
But
a lot of people overlook how something like tourism can affect the cost of living in certain areas because you're just basically making your city or your town only appealing to people from the outside coming in, but then it totally ignores the people who actually live there. And we see that in many areas where cost of living is outpacing what the people who live in those towns can actually earn for a living based on the jobs that are offered. And it's getting hard in a lot of different places because of things like tourism, but we're just using tourism as an example.
yeah, I mean, like, hey, it's not that tourism's bad. Manage your tourism. Like, this
Right.
isn't hard.
Yeah.
Like, and in Barcelona, that's what they're gonna do. They're gonna like all the Airbnbs. They're pulling all their permits. And so, if you want to visit Barcelona as a tourist, you're gonna stay in a hotel like you'd probably expect to stay.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
that. And you know what? I think it's gonna have a really good impact on their rents, and I think it's gonna work. And maybe if they want to have maybe they're going to need to build more hotels, which is going to create more jobs, in construction and at hotels. And in the end, this may work out really well for Barcelona, right? So we have to, we shouldn't vilify tourism or share or like, make it like it's this triumphant success. It's just an issue that created another issue, which is how things mostly work. I mean, Modesto's got the same problem, just what you described, right? Like, if you're an average Modestan, the average income in Modesto was about $60,000 a year. You can't buy a house.
No. No.
That is
Well,
effed
I
up.
want to bring.
Excuse my French.
Yeah.
That's
No.
effed up.
You can say whatever you want on the show. It already goes explicit. I say a few choice words when I don't have guests, so don't worry about it. I was going to bring something up to that because this podcast is like most all of them. Anyone around the world can listen to it, and a lot of people equate California with either L.A. or San Francisco. We're in that area where we're not that far from what they consider the Bay.
Yeah.
And what the sad thing is being in Modesto is we have, as you said, there's over 200,000 people living here, but what they don't know is the wages aren't enough for the average person because there's not a lot of the jobs that will support certain professions where, as you said, they don't earn enough to buy a house anymore, especially after the pandemic. Everything went up at least 4 times what it used to. So within 3 years, you're seeing a house that went, example, 175, and now here we're looking at, 450, 575. That's huge. And most people here just literally sleep here, and then they spend X amount of hours on the road. I'll give you a little backstory on my experience with that because I used to own a sales rep firm years ago, and I represented a bunch of companies in the musical instrument, professional audio, video industry, and all that. And I went to all the trade shows and blah blah blah. But the thing is, I remember the how many people would commute because by that time I was living in Modesto, and I would spend 10 hours a day on the road to visit 3 people. Okay, 3 people, and there's people who do this every day just to make a living. They're spending because of traffic 3 to 4 hours just to get to work in the Bay, wherever it may be, and then another 3 to 4 hours. So they're leaving at 2:30 in the morning, 3 in the morning, coming back at 8 or 9 at night most times, and that's a crazy way to live. And it's like they can't even afford to enjoy the city that they live in because they're always commuting and burning themselves out. What is the? I know you can't offer a solution, but I wouldn't mind getting your thought on that. Is there any way you think cities like Modesto that are considered like, oh, you guys aren't as advanced or up to par as the Bay, when in reality, most of the workforce is coming from cities like ours. So is there any way you see or any path you see down the road to cities like ours actually being able to offer the jobs that will actually allow people to live in the cities that they actually own homes in or rent in?
I think we need to look at it maybe a different way. I think, the short-term solution to the problem is just increasing supply. We need to build more homes, and we need to build homes of all shapes and sizes. Like right now, we tend to build a lot of single family homes, which is fine. We need single family homes too, but we need to see more smaller homes, and we need to see more multi-family options. Um, so that's probably the easiest, most direct route. In terms of how do we get better jobs, I mean, I think the answer is much more complicated and much more difficult. I mean, the real reality is we need to completely adjust our culture to become a culture that values education. Um, we can, there's a huge, um, you know, group out there pushing like, oh, we need to do just technical education and most kids should go into technical education,
Mm-hmm.
right? But what you're doing by directing people to not go to get, degrees and go to college is you're dooming them to blue collar work for the rest of their lives, essentially. And that's not true to everybody, but that's just the basics. And for Modesto, we can't attract, like an Apple or, an Nvidia to come to Modesto because our college grad rate is, 18%, which is on par with like some of the least educated cities in the entire country. And so it's not a fun answer that anyone wants to hear, but it's the truth, you
Yeah,
know?
I mean, I'm not going to argue or against or disagree with that. Even if you talk about trades, though, I'll give you an example. In trades, electricians make extremely good money. So do plumbers, and they may not be the most glamorous jobs, but they get paid extremely well, especially once you move up. Journeymen making very good money, good retirements, but even they, if they choose that pathway here, are commuting to work for companies in the Bay because there's not enough contracts to support even them here locally. And I've
Yeah,
seen
well,
this
the thing is, like,
firsthand.
this is not an argument against the trades, right? You're still going
No,
to
no, you're
have
not
that.
arguing. I didn't say you were. I was
Yeah.
just using that
Yeah.
as an example. What I'm trying to say is I still see people having to go find those other jobs elsewhere, regardless of what profession they choose. It's sad to see that they have to do that, or if they feel they do anyway.
Right, but the thing is, like, if you've all, in a city like Modesto, we've got very healthy trades and they're doing great, right? But what we need is that other piece on top that's like bringing in the big corporation that needs a big workforce. Um, and that drives more economic development, right? So once you've got, that big company that comes in and talks about how great it is and the culture's great and everything's great here, then you get another one and you get another one. And
Yeah,
that's when you start being able to build, that's when the trades are starting to work more locally than they are, moving out into the Bay Area where everything's growing like gangbusters because that's where the workforce is,
true.
So it's all connected.
Absolutely. One feeds the other. I mean, it's
Right.
the do you think we're talking local, so whoever's listening to this, you may not understand everything we're talking about, but we have Merced not that far, so they have the university, which has been growing like crazy. And I provide a lot of services for them for different things. And I've seen them grow over the years. So UC Merced, do you think that will help attract those companies down the road to places like Modesto or even Merced or anywhere in the valley, being that now there's more people that are getting educated and coming away with a high, a degree in whatever discipline they choose. Right? And we also have, Stan State out in Turlock. Do you think UC Merced is going to help with that? Because they become a pretty well recognized institution at this point.
Yeah, I think UC Merced is a keystone to, developing Merced and Merced County's economy. I don't think that the ripples will be felt in Modesto. I mean, Merced's more or less an hour away from here. It's like no different than, Berkeley's an hour from here too, right?
True.
So you're gonna see like you're gonna see ripples of the waves that, appear in Modesto, but you're not gonna see dramatic economic development here because of Merced, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, okay. I
That's
can,
just my opinion. I could be wrong.
no. I asked. I mean, you have a different view of things from being, in city council and seeing a lot of different stuff behind the scenes, as I say, because I don't. So I did notice with something like that, though, and just using them again as an example, UC Merced, is I did get to meet a lot of students that were actually not from the valley; they're from out of state. And so that's why I asked that, because people are getting used to traveling, applying for jobs where they have to relocate and whatnot. But I guess time will tell, right? We'll see.
I mean, I'd rather you be right.
I would hope. I mean, it'd be nice. But I mean, either way, we have seen changes, and it's been a slow progression, but things have been getting better, and it's getting there. I just wish it was easier for people like you said to afford a house in their own backyard, and unfortunately, it's not quite the case right now. We may get there, but again, the only thing I could do is stay hopeful about it.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll get there or not, but I think that we're sure gonna try.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
it's possible.
I'm going to ask you another question about, because a lot of people, when they go to the city government websites, okay, for example, you're a council member, and I know that what people don't understand in city government, so you have like your city manager, and they have council members, etc. That a lot of them, such as yourselves, have to be involved in certain committees. And what I wanted to ask you is, basically, can you explain to the average person why we have these committees and what they actually do? Like, you have a few here that you sent me. So you're on a safety committee, economic development committee, cannabis permit review, for example. But can you explain, the importance of these committees and why people like you need to be involved in them?
Yeah, I think of the committee as like it's like a filter, So the way this local government works is the bureaucrats come up with policy, and then they feed that policy through to the committee, and then from the committee it goes to the council. Um, and there are lots of exceptions. Like sometimes council members will come up with policy that goes to the bureaucracy, that goes to the committee, that goes to the council, right? But by and large, most of the stuff we get is like the bureaucracy is like, hey, our paving machine that we use to repair our streets is broken. We need to buy a new one. It's going to cost $733,000. And we've priced it out. We've gone to 5 different places, and here's the best price. What do you think, council? It goes to the the economic development committee, and we go, well, we sure want paved streets are important, and if our machine's broken, we need a new one. Great, let's invest in that. So the committee passes it and sends it on to council, right? Um, but what the committees do is if something turns out to be controversial, it offers the government a chance to go back and adjust the policy so that it has a better chance of passing when it gets to the council.
Yeah, there's a lot. I think there's a perception for most people that committees are kind of just more bureaucracy and a waste of time, but they don't realize it's a buffer. It's a way, like you said, to filter and get to narrow in on the actual issue and fine tune what the issue is before it actually gets to the decision makers.
Yeah, it's like level one of decision. Like, hey,
Yeah.
did you pass the minor checkpoint? Okay, now you get to go to the big boss. That's what it is. And the great thing about committee meetings is that they're all open to the public, and you can go down there and now it's like instead of you with 200 people at City Hall, it's you with two. It's you with 10 bureaucrats by yourself commenting on it. So like the committee meetings are a really good way to connect and have good conversations with the government and with your representatives.
Yeah, that's very important. So another way people can get involved and really try to
More time, man, more time.
it is time. It's all time invested, and it's unfortunately most people they're consumed with work, getting up at a certain time, taking care of the kids. They got school, everything to worry about, whatever's going on in their lives. And at the end of the day, they're like, oh yeah, there's a meeting oh man, I think I'm just going to sit back and have a beer,
Yeah.
And that happens, life happens. So I was going to ask you I think we're going to start wrapping it up, sir. Is there anything you want to kind of promote or get out there to the public on the show here?
I mean, I think communication is really important. So, follow on social media on your favorite platform. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So follow me there on all those three platforms. I'm also on TikTok, but I don't do as much content as I'd like to on TikTok just because it takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
But I do post there from time to time too. So join me there. If you want to see like what I stand for, you can go to chrisricciforcouncil.com. Ricci is RICCI. You'll see you'll get a good kind of overview of some of the long-term projects I'm working on. I started off my campaign with 100 ideas to make Modesto better, and I'm really proud that like we've gotten a lot of them done, so it's kind of cool. So you can go back and look at the original 100 ideas and look at what the 100 ideas look like today.
That's cool. That's very cool.
And then look at achievements. Look at the stuff we've done.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, I appreciate your time. I do. I know you're busy, and I'm glad you agreed to do this. And I'm always like talking to people, and getting different perspectives. So thanks. And maybe down the road we'll do this again.
Yeah, George, this was great. Thanks for having me. And I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it as well. Thank you very much. And let's stay in touch.
Yeah, man, for sure.